All right, I think we can get started. Um, Welcome everyone. If you haven't met me before, my name is Faisal. I am the communications lead at the Scanlon Foundation. Um, Really glad everyone could join. I hope people don't mind that we'll be recording this session for those that are unable to attend. We have a few people that are currently overseas at the moment, so we will definitely be sharing this with them afterwards. I wanted to welcome you to this information session for the African Australian Creative Media Grants because, like last year, this is our second iteration. We noticed that people had a lot of questions regarding how to approach the grants and questions about whether they might be eligible. So we thought it might be actually a good opportunity to do this all at once. So just before I begin, I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting. I'm in Melbourne, so I want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I do have these headphones in deliberately so that you can hear me well. And if I ever do cut out or if my internet goes a little bit slow, I just want you to send me a message in the chat. So for those that are here, I do encourage you just to introduce yourself. Um, if you could write in the chat who you are, maybe even tell us a little bit about your creative journey, and any links you want us to have a look at. And I hope throughout our discussion today, if you have any questions, just use the chat function. So that way I can have a look as we're going and Rachel can let me know. So now let's start with actually the how this session is going to run. First, I'm going to do an introduction to the Scanlon Foundation for those who are new to the foundation's work. If you've never heard of us, I think this will be a little bit of background and context to who we are. I'm going to run through the purpose of the grant, why we created it, then, of course, how people can actually apply, who is eligible, then the thing that I think is most important to everybody, but the key application section. So I want to go through the criteria and I want to talk about budgets. One of the last things we're going to talk about are the features of what we think are a successful project. And then importantly, the selection process. So how things are going to go down. And then I'm going to open it up to questions at the end. So I'll try my best to talk as quickly as possible, but if I'm going too slow, then you are very welcome to tell me to speed up. So let's start with an introduction to the Scanlon Foundation. So the foundation is actually a small team. So Anthea here is our CEO, and Rachel Scotland, who you can see her name there, she's the foundation's programs manager. And together the focus of the foundation is on social cohesion. So the Scanlon Foundation is a private family foundation for the Scanlon family, and it is a philanthropy. So it actually provides grants, and our focus is on, the transition of migrants into Australian society. So we have various grant programs as a foundation where we support initiatives that look at employment or literacy, but the focus of ours, of course, broadly is social cohesion. So we're interested in making, people that are new to Australia feel like they belong in Australia. And one of those parts, I guess, is storytelling, which I'll tell you about in a second. But we do have other large flagship projects which are that we support, which is Community Hubs Australia, Taste of Harmony, and Welcoming Australia. I'm happy to provide any more information about those things, but that's just a little bit of context to who the Scanlon Foundation is. Now, I, I think in the interest of time, so if you can hear a siren in the background, I want to talk about this actual program. So in case we don't get through everything, I thought this is at least the thing that you need to know. The African Australian Creative Media Program is an open grant round, and it's designed to support African Australian creatives and platforms. This program is, it says was there, is open to individuals and organizations that operate in creative media, visual media, podcasting, radio, written media, anything on that sort. So it's not a grant round for things like fine arts, but it's more about visual media. It's more about creative media, so it's quite broad, but I just thought I'd mention that. The grant round is actually comprised of three streams. One is platform development, which I'm going to talk about, content creation, which I'll dive into later, and live events. So altogether, we're looking to fund a total of 12 applications. So that was actually up from 6 last year. So we initially planned on funding 6, but we ended up funding 12 because of the interest. So why are we doing this? I think as a foundation, as I mentioned before, we're interested in social cohesion, which is a term that's hard to define, but particularly how the newest arrivals and communities in Australia can feel a sense of belonging, participate in the broader society, but also feel that they have the opportunity to tell their own narratives and tell their own stories. And I think the foundation has a long interest in that, particularly with past projects and platforms that the foundation has supported. We thought we wanted to actually broaden this out and support even more initiatives through a more structured way. And this grant round looks at kind of three things that we're interested in. One is community voices. We want people to be able to tell their stories, as I mentioned. And we also want to uh, I guess showcase the diversity of experiences that that exist within the African Australian communities. Now we know that there isn't one African community; there are so many. So I think this grant round is about acknowledging that. The Of course, there's actual vehicles and platforms that are the best ways to tell stories. So we want to focus on increasing the actual viability and the reach and opportunities for those kinds of platforms to grow. So that is a real focus area for us, which is also why we created that particular stream called platform development. And the last thing is sector development. So we know that there are a lot of challenges within the Australian creative media space. We heard it directly from a bunch of creatives when we held roundtables in 2020 that actually let us into a lot of insight into how people are experiencing their what life is like navigating Australian media, which is of course they tell us all the time is not necessarily the most inclusive. It's changing a lot over the last couple of years, but there are a long ways to go. So we're hoping that this grant round really can contribute, is our contribution to, you know, providing more spaces for people to kind of get a foot in the door in their own respective industries. So we're hoping that this is what this opportunity provides. Like I said, any questions, please stop me. I will have a look at the chat as we go. It's nice to meet you, Elmi. Yes, we actually had a chat, I think, a few weeks ago, so it's really great to meet you. So, Gali, as always, it's so good to see you. And Liz, I believe it's Scottness. I see it's Russell here. So it's nice to meet you all. Keep chatting in there if any questions arise. I'll look at this from time to time. Now, let's move on. Okay, how to apply. We actually managed this grant round through a platform called Smarty Grants, which you'll be given the link after this conversation. I can actually add it in right at the end of our discussion today as well. Smarty Grants it's not actually our platform. It's kind of a grant making tool that a lot of philanthropic organizations, government use to manage grant programs. So in it, it gives you these kinds of options where you can actually obviously first start a submission, but you can actually look at the form first. So you can download the form, figure out how you want to respond to the questions. I know many of you might be part of larger teams. So you might actually want to download the form first, talk about the questions with your teams, and then, go through that in that sense. So that's just one of the tools that I think a lot of grant makers use, and it's one that we use. So if you ever have questions on how to navigate it, or if you have actual issues with the form, let us know. But it actually might be better to talk directly with Smarty Grants as well, because they know their system a lot better than we ever would. So Now, with this particular grant program, I want to talk about who is eligible because this is the question that I get quite often. Um, there's a few things that you'll need. At minimum, you definitely are going to need a ABN, so an Australian business number. I think most people are pretty familiar with ABNs. Let me know if you're not. But that is actually a requirement for this. Now, we will accept applications, and you don't have to fit all these categories, you just can fit one of them. But African Australians individuals in any creative media industry. I want to specify that when we say the word African Australian, it's a very broad term. So it's those that identify as African Australian. If you identify as African Australian, you're welcome to apply. If you don't, then of course I doubt that you would be interested in this program in the first place. So that is really important to specify. That also is, I add that in there because I also want to say it does not matter where um, where exactly what your visa status is, or whether you're only here, whether you've only been in Australia for a short period, or whether you're just a citizen, or whether you're from New Zealand. It does not matter to us because we want to acknowledge, we use the word Australian, but I think the term might be better, Africans in Australia. um, Now, when I say creative industry, this might include anything from TV, film, magazines, radio, podcasts, really any media that you people use, I guess, kind of to have as their creative outlet. So it's a really broad term, but I would like you to consider this in the realm of media, not necessarily just art. So that's an important part of defining that. Now, we've added media platforms led by African Australians. Now, that's another group of people that I are certainly encouraged to apply. So I just noticed I have a question here. What about media companies that help African Australians create and publish podcasts, which may not be led by African Australians, but the show is presented by African Australians? It's a good question. This grant round is actually a direct grant round. So if you are, if they are applying for it through your channel, then it's actually their application. So we welcome people to collaborate and support initiatives, but we actually want direct applications because we want to hear what people, their ideas and their initiatives and their projects directly. So it's a good question. I hope that answers that, Russell. Um, but yeah, please let me know. So what we don't want is people to apply on behalf of others. We want people to actually apply directly to us. They can apply with the support of another organization, but the application should come from those people. Um, so Africans in Australia, regardless of their background, as I mentioned, and African community organizations. But I want to specify here, they should have their project and their application should be focused on stories and storytelling. So if you are part of an African community organization, the difference is that this grant round is not just a random grant round, it's still related to creative media and storytelling. So we do welcome your application, absolutely. I know Sagali has a great little initiative that he's, I shouldn't say little, I think it's actually growing amazingly. So an application from a group like his would absolutely be relevant if it was to do with creative media or storytelling, or anything in that realm. So the last thing I just want to add is successful grantees from 2021 are not eligible for this round because we want to make it fair and actually sort of spread the love around and make sure that this is more of an equitable space so that more people are able to make advantage of this grant program. So I'll move on. Now, a few things that a few oh, now the first thing I've noticed is I've actually I've actually completely screwed up the title. So pay no attention to the numbers. Just pay attention to the headings. That's all. So that's something I probably should have had a look at yesterday. But The thing that I want to talk about here is a couple of the questions that the form that I mentioned you can download has. Um, One of the things that it asks you to do is describe what you or your organization does. And I think this is a really good opportunity to capture, your story, your organization, and what it specifically focuses on. So if you're a media platform that tells these kind of stories, this is the opportunity for you to tell us that you don't need to delve too deep into your project just yet. Just we want to get a picture of who you are, that kind of thing, and your relationship with creative media. The second is providing a brief description of your project, including the aims and objectives. So this should actually give us a bit more guidance as to what it is you're trying to achieve, what is your project, what is the nature of it, and I guess what you're hoping to get out of it. We'll get into that next as well, because the next question is about your planned activities. So this is specifically about your project. So what is it that you want to create? What are you actually applying for? What is the activity that is the purpose of your application for this grant? So that's when you should be telling us, my plan is to create a live event series that is around, short films, for example. As you can tell, I love film, so I always use that as example. But that's a example there of you telling us exactly how you want to what you're wanting to create, if that makes sense. Now, this is an incredibly important point. Please tell us how the project will address the key criteria. I'm going to go through the criteria for each stream next, but this is a really important thing. You really should make sure that you have addressed each of the three or four points in your particular stream. I highly suggest you don't look at other streams when you're designing your application. Just look at your stream and look at the key criteria. It's the kind of guideline for us on how we assess these applications, if that makes sense. So make sure you're absolutely relevant to what the criteria is, and that you're really responding to the things that are in there. Now, the next part is your expected outcomes. You should be as clear as possible as to what you'd like to achieve. Now, I understand that, sometimes we don't get to achieve everything we want, but it would be really important for you from the very start to tell us through this project what you think you can actually create. Like, what are the assets you'll create? Where do you think this project will go? What kind of impact do you think it will make? Those kinds of things are really important for us to know, to see how ambitious it is. Doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be ambitious. It's just more that it gives us a bit of a guideline as to what you think are the things that will come out of it. A project budget, which we'll talk about in a second, and support materials, which I will just tell you right now is we'd love to see you include any social media assets, social media profiles, things that we can look at. Like, we've added something in the form that allows you to put in an Instagram or a YouTube page or a Facebook or something like that, that can kind of give us a bit of a background into who you are. But also, we invite you to include a CV. So it tells us a little bit more about your experience. You're welcome to include reference letters, any attachments, those kinds of things. But at least at minimum, we ask, some kind of social handle or link to your work. And then, of course, a CV. Now, I'm going to stop again just before I continue. If anyone has any questions, um, please do let me know now, and then I'll go into the next section. And I just want to say hello to Noor Shanino as well. Welcome, Noor, who very kindly told me about my link for this webinar was not working when I first put it out there. So thank you for that, Noor. Um, I'm going to move on in the interest of time. I'm hoping we can wrap this up a bit early if people have other things to do. The first thing is the platform development. Now, this is a stream, as it says, is $10,000 to support the improvement and continuation of platforms, including websites, social media sites, or other. Now, what we mean by that is we are interested in the opportunities for, it could be a podcast, it could be a production, a small production company, it could be a media platform, whatever it needs to be. It could be a magazine. This particular funding stream is about letting you grow your platform or make it more sustainable or more viable in many ways. Um, which is really, really useful for organizations that are interested in upscaling, in buying equipment, in buying the things and allowing them to get to that stage that, they might not necessarily have had otherwise. So we're hoping that this is just a little injection into their platform that they can use to grow. I'm gonna pause for a second just to answer Nia Deng's question. Hi, Nia Deng. Haven't seen you in ages. Hi Faisal, would you want a CV just for one artist or everyone involved in the project? I think the more information, the better. If you can include more artists, if you can include all those are involved, it just gives us a better sense of who's running this project. So I would recommend including multiple if the Smarty Grants allows you. If not, just add the main artist. You can also add their CVs in your additional attachments anyway. So if it's to you that's running it, just at least add yourself. I'll go back to here now, the selection criteria for the platform development. Now they're based on four things. One is relationships. To grow your platform, we're completely understanding of how important it is for the for media platforms, because they don't exist in an ecosystem. They don't exist like in isolation. To start to branch out, create larger networks, have additional collaborations, bring new people in, just start to really expand their network. So that's something that we want to see in the application, how your project talks about that. We would love to hear the second one is reach. So we want to hear about how these funds are used to raise the profile of the platform and its content or whatever is being made in that platform. So, this might be anything from a marketing plan or, ad spend, or, you're creating a website, that's going to allow you to, have a larger, I guess kind of like a digital home for your platform. These are the kinds of things we want to see, but we also want to see how you trying to expand the audience of your platform so that it's not just a few people that might experience it. The next is operational capacity. So we want you to show us uh, what kind of things have you done in the past that shows us you can deliver on the project that you're putting forward. So this is really important. If we don't, as as the selection panel is looking through this, if you're basically trying to create the new Facebook, but you've never, managed a website before, then you probably don't have the operational capacity to do that. I think it's really useful for you to just demonstrate where your skill sets lie, if that makes sense, and what have you done in the past that shows that. Now, the last one may not make the most sense just yet, but I'll explain, is viability. So we want to hear about what strategic steps you're taking in your project to grow your platform, whether that's financially, whether that's more sustainably, whether that's creating a new if you're run by volunteers, is it you're thinking really effectively on your volunteer retention process. If you have a particular system that you're trying to implement, we want you to think really strategically, because we think that this is such a key part of growing a media platform. Awak, it's good to see you. Awak is also here. Can applicants apply for more than one stream? Great question. Yes, they can. They can, but like we said last year, if you are successful, you'll only be successful for one of those streams. So yes, you can apply for multiple, but you'll only be successful one. And that is, again, in the interest of fairness. So before I move on from platform development, do I have any questions about platform development? So Gali, good question. It'll be 12. So in platform development, there'll be 5 successful applications. In content creation, there'll be 5. And then in live events, there'll be 2 because that's a smaller grant opportunity. So 5 for platform, 5 for content, and 2 for live events. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Now, the second one is content creation, which is I think most people are pretty excited about. So that what we've done this year is we've actually simplified the language now. Last year we did there was reference to narratives and stories, of African Australians. We thought that that's quite complicated. We actually have done it this way. We said 10,000 for the execution of original content and productions created by African Australians. So this could be led by, co-created, but it's created by African Australians because we don't believe it's the foundation's role to tell what kind of African stories are valuable and worth telling. We just want to kind of I guess support the nature of African Australian storytelling in general. So um, now to help us navigate how to look at these applications, we've again set it by 4 criteria. Now the first one is capacity. So we've looked at, again, what has the person done before that shows us they can deliver it again, or this particular initiative. 2 is voices. So we want to know how this project that you're talking about raises the profile of stories created by African Australians. So we want to know why this is an important story and how does this actually support how does it raise the profile of those that are, making this kinds of content. The third is originality. Now, I completely understand that it's really hard to show evidence of originality. Instead, we want a statement that just tells us a bit more about, what inspired the project, what's its significance, anything along those lines will be really useful for us to get a sense of how you came up with this and where does it fit in amongst other things. So a statement on originality is really important. The last is reach. So just because you create content doesn't mean anyone will look at it. So we want to hear and learn more about any kind of promotional or marketing or engagement plan that is associated with the project and your desired audience. Now, I use that word desired specifically because we're not all one audience and so many people like different things. So the word desired is if you're trying to reach a particular group, who are they and how are you trying to reach them? So I think they're all important factors. Now, content execution, what can you use towards the funding is really anything that is helping you execute that project. So if you need to buy equipment that helps you or hire venues or, pay actors or even, part of it could be really towards paying yourself, that is what is a key feature of content creation. So a lot of people need to buy materials or they need to, maybe even purchase flights that take them to places to shoot stuff. If it helps you create the content, then you can absolutely have it as part of your application. Now, the third, and I'm sorry if the writing is small, is live events. Now, this is a smaller grant. This is actually about bringing people together. So live events that showcase creative media and expression. Now, live events for their own sake, probably not relevant. It should still be about creative media and expression. You should still be thinking about how you're showcasing, whether it's, fashion, which we had last year, or music, or anything about storytelling. I think that's something really important to consider. Now, there's this one. I'll just run through this really quickly. One is engagement. So evidence of promotional or marketing plan to secure the people. So this is I think, one of the most important parts. Just because you have a live event doesn't mean anyone's going to show up. So we really want you to think through, how are you going to secure people for your event? 2 is, how do you actually plan on delivering the event? 3, which is community, is who do you think will come to this event? We want you to tell us how this event will bring people together. Who are you actually going for? And why are you going for those kinds of people? That kind of thing is really useful for us. And originality. So again, we've used the word evidence of originality of the event's concept. Now, not all events can be completely original. We just want you to tell us, why this particular event is unique in whatever way. Great question from Anthea. Will we be providing the slides to the attendees after the event? Absolutely. I'll send them around afterwards. So don't worry and we'll send this recording around as well. So you'll have both. Now, I want to talk about budgets, which is one of the things people had troubles with last year. Your budget for this grant is really, we're just asking for your expenditure. So what kinds of things are you actually going to purchase with this grant? So we've included some examples, which is website hosting fees, technical equipment, administration costs, venue hire, and graphic designer, consultant, those kinds of things. These are examples of expenditure. So you would list them on the right side here, and you'd actually make sure that, if your project, if you calculate it that it goes underneath 10,000, or if you're applying for stream 3 underneath 5,000, we encourage you to apply. We're going to still fund you the full 10,000. So as creatives and as storytellers, I think you should really feel comfortable in paying yourself. So I think that is a really important part of making sure that this industry grows. So you are absolutely welcome to pay yourself in that context. Now, yeah, my colleague Rachel mentioned before, you should value your hours. So as the creative, that is an important part. So make sure you list all relevant expenditure or expenses that are part of this project. Don't include things that are completely irrelevant to it, because that will not make a lot of sense. Now, I have a question from Scott Ness. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Who owns the IP once the project is created? We do not own any of the IP. It is completely yours. You are the complete control of the creative assets you create. All we ask is you tell us what you're doing, how you're going, and really just keep us in the loop. We might ask, if you do create something, if we're able to share it within our own networks, but we are not the people who own the IP of anything you make. So I just thought you can be reassured on that. I want to get through this next few parts so that I can open it up to any final questions and let people leave early if they need to. Features of a successful project. This is what I think is most of interest to everybody here. Now, the features of a successful project, first, more than anything else, is addressing the selection criteria. If you do not address the key selection criteria by which your particular stream asks for, then that tells us that compared to somebody who has, your application is not necessarily as strong. It's really, really clear. Address each part of the selection criteria to give yourself the best chance. That is something that we didn't see as much last year. We're really hoping to see more this year, which is why we held this information session. But I completely understand, for many people, you're not professional grant writers. So that's why on number 2, we've written here, be clear and concise. Really talk. We're not a arts body or an art funding organization. So the more clear your language is, the more simple it is, the more you can get to the point in a concise way, that's the better for us. So that at least helps us to get a really clear picture of what you're trying to articulate. So what I mean by that is keep your language, relatively simple. You actually generally don't need to have the most sophisticated language to be successful. You just need to give context to anything you any terms that you use. So if you use particular creative jargon, that's fine. Just give context to what you mean. You might even want to include a nice little glossary or something to say like, this is what I meant by this. So um, as we are the ones who first look at this as a shortlist, um, I think the thing that I found the most success for people is when they just spoke plainly and clearly. The third is show evidence. Now, if you talk a big game, but you don't necessarily back it up with a bunch of things to show that you've done stuff or you can do stuff, then it's really hard for us to assess that. So just try as much as possible to show evidence of your work, show creative projects you've been part of before, or, your show reel or things that you've done in the past. I think that gives us a bit of a picture to say, wow, okay, I can see where that person's capability is. And the last one I would say is write specifically for this grant round. Do not copy and paste something you've written for another grant round. Write specifically for this one. So that is self-explanatory, but what often people do is they think this worked for me before, I can just copy and paste that. I promise you that will not work. We really want to hear in a really engaging way what you're trying to make, how you're trying to make it, and evidence that you've done this stuff before, just in the most simple language as possible. So yeah, really keep it as simple as possible, but also for this grant round. Now, I have a question. I have two questions. I'm going to come back to them at the end because I just want to talk about the selection panel and the process. So we have a wonderful selection panel. We have Amar Yonis, who is a multimedia artist. He currently probably calls himself a photographer. I think he would even object to that. He is an incredible Haredi Australian creative based in Melbourne. Flex Mami, who is known as Lillian, she is one. I'm sure many of you guys might have heard of her before, but she's been a wonderful advocate for this program as well. She's really excited to see what kind of projects come about. Jessica Bailey, who is a wonderful, wonderful multimedia, multi-create, makes everything you can probably think of, has a wonderful platform, is based in Western Australia. And she is one of the people that again got really excited by this project, and we're really lucky to have her. And of course, the really experienced and wonderful Chris Vaughan, who is I would still call him a creative, but he actually knows a lot about the creative industries as a professional. So navigating that from the organization is part of AU Dollars. He has a lot of experience in film and television, particularly in finance, in how to upscale and create financial models for creative businesses. So Chris is a wonderful asset to this panel as well. So he'll definitely be a great pair of eyes for us. Um, uh, Together, that panel is also including myself. It's going to also include my colleague Rachel, who's in the chat today, and Anthea. So it will be the 7 of us altogether will decide, so it's deliberately an odd number. All applicants will be informed of the outcome via email before the 15th of December. And we hope that all activity is expected to commence no later than the 1st of February 2023. So the timeline will be 1st of, basically Jan, Feb to December at the very, very latest. The process is, I just want to be completely transparent about this, is that because we get quite a lot of applications that came through last year, what we do first as a foundation staff is to go through it, make sure all that are eligible are put forward, and then we actually go through a first round of creating a shortlist. So that is what the foundation does. Then, as a shortlist, we put a recommendation to the selection panel, and together as a selection panel, we decide on some successful applications based on the selection criteria that I was going through before. Now, what the panelists are able to do is, if something is not included in our shortlist, they're able to recommend it they'll have access to all the applications. So I just thought I'd mention that just in case you're interested in what the process was. And finally, I want to open it up to questions. So I might invite Rachel, if she's able, to join me. And
I'm
what I'll
here.
do
I don't know
is
if anyone can see me.
I'll just end my slideshow so that you can also see Rachel.
Great.
Rachel,
So
there was a question. I
yeah,
was hoping you might be able to, in terms of acquiring the grant, what is the process? So how does that work?
so that's probably the what happens in between the 15th of December when we make the announcement to everyone around successful or unsuccessful, and then the actual kickoff point. So during that time over December, and probably a bit more in January, we will need each of these successful applicants to sign a grant agreement and submit an invoice, and we process all of that and obviously send out the funds. So we will make sure that that's done prior to you starting your project.
Yeah, thank you.
That's good.
Sagali, great question. Would a Dropbox link be allowed, or a Google Doc? Whichever works. So if you can, I think there is a part where you can actually provide links, and if not, just let us know. But either one works. If it's I think Dropbox is usually really good because it's easy to get into. But just let us know whatever your preference is, and you're very welcome to use either. Any other questions before we wrap up? I think I just want to give everyone this opportunity to ask any questions that they might have, and then I'll probably close the meeting and send through the presentation and the recording. Any final questions from anyone? That is absolutely fine. That's great. Well, what we're going to do is I'm just going to share my screen one more time. If you have any questions, please email our foundation email, because then Rachel or myself can answer it. So it's foundation@scanlonfoundation.org.au. I've added my office line here because it goes straight through to my mobile. So I'm happy to answer questions that you might have, but I think we've probably covered most of it. Just remember the key date is Tuesday, the 18th of October at midnight. So you have until then to apply. Please do spread the word for those that you think might benefit from the grant. If you're tuning in today because somebody around you wants to apply, just let them know that it's Tuesday the 18th of October at midnight, and all the information about the grant is on our website. So I just wanted to add that final part there. So
and the recording will be available on the website too.
We also, if you want to know a bit more about our work, let me know. I think we do have a podcast for our institute, which I want to do a quick plug. It's called Voices of Australia. If you want to know a little bit about how the story of social cohesion, what it is, and hear from different people, you can actually find Voices of Australia podcast wherever you get your podcast. So I just wanted to do a mandatory plug, which I am lucky to be a producer for. So Sagali, final question, where would we be able to get this recording? I will make it a YouTube link, and then you can actually share that. Look at it 50 times if you want to hear my voice again. And we'll make sure that that gets out to you. So I'll share that around again. But again, I just want to say thank everyone for joining today. Yeah, it's been wonderful. I hope that this was useful. And yeah, we'll be in touch again. I wish you guys the very best with your applications, and be in touch if you have any questions. But enjoy the rest of your afternoon.